Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Today we will have the last lecture in microbiology regarding PNS, Neuroscience 2 module. Today's lecture is about prions and viroids. This is very important lecture and at the same time very special lecture. And it requires your attention because what you are going to hear is something new for you, or probably you haven't came across before to such topics. The learning objectives about this lecture to talk historical background, to give you historical background about these items, in particular prions, to talk about basic structure, classification of diseases caused by prions, epidemiology, pathogenesis, pathology, laboratory diagnosis, few lines about the treatment and the prevention. Starting with limited information about viroids, and then we are going to devote the rest of the lecture about the prions. Viroids are short, naked, عارية لوحدها, fragments of single-stranded RNA between 300 and 400 nucleotides in origin. So it's just RNA, single-stranded, 300 to 400 nucleotides, very short. And these viroids interfere with the plant growth and nabatat and can also kill plants. No diseases are discovered yet in animals, including a human being. So they are not a human being particles. They cause diseases in plants. Just for information, because we coined the word viroids and the prions. So just to put it for you, these are particles of short RNA fragments. So prions, we are going to concentrate on it during this lecture. These are small infectious proteins. They are not viruses, not bacteria, not fungi. These are small infectious proteins. Remember this. And they can cause fatal neurological diseases because they have a predilection to the nervous system. There are certain diseases in animals and in humans caused by prions. One of the most important diseases caused by prions in animals is called bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which is called mad cow disease, MCD. What is MCD? جنون البقر، وأكيد سامعين. مرض جنون البقر الذي ينتقل للإنسان. Bovine, it means بقري. Spongiform, الدماغ يصبح زي الإسفنجة، يثقب بالبريونز، يصير به ثقوب. So bovine spongiform encephalopathy or encephalopathy. The other disease also common, and the veterinarians, they know such a disease, which is called scrapie, is a pruritus of sheep and goat. And we will talk in details about this because, again, it has similarity to human diseases. In human, prions can cause 5 diseases, Crossfield-Jacob disease of two variant, CJD, Crossfield-Jacob disease, and variant Crossfield-Jacob disease. The second or the third one, the Christman-Strasser-Schinker disease, GSS. The fourth, Kuro, and the last one, fatal familial insomnia. insomnia عدم المقدرة على النوم. We will go into the details of these diseases during the lecture. So the different diseases that I have mentioned, these are the 5 items. And in animals, we are going to talk about scrapie and bovine spongiform encephalopathy. There are other 2 diseases which are animal diseases. We are not concerned with them. Scabie, we will talk about it, is a prion disease of sheep and goat, we said, involve the central nervous system, characterized by lack of coordination of the animal. And the animal will rub themselves to wall, to tree, يصير عنده زي الحكة pruritus. These proteins, which we said are the infectious agents of these diseases, devoid of any nucleic acids. The infection by abnormal protein, which we call it a prion protein. So PR, protein, P, a prion, SC, scrapie, which I have mentioned the disease here, scrapie, because it is a model for the infection. So protein prion SC, change from normal, which is a protein prion C cellular of the cells, is present in ordinary cells. This protein, by certain mechanism, this protein will change from PC to PSC, from cellular to scrapie. These scrapie proteins inhibit proteasomes 26S, which is enzyme. What is the difference between these proteins? Now, the PSC has excessive beta sheet. Around it, there is a sheet around the protein called beta sheet, while the C protein, the normal one, has alpha helix. So beta and alpha helix in this structure. And we are not going to go into details because this is rather a chemical composition, not important to us. But remember that the SC, the abnormal one, has got beta sheet, while the normal one has got alpha helix around it. Because these are a protein, there will be accumulation of myeloid, deposition of this protein, which becomes myeloid in the CNS. And this will result in a spongiform encephalopathy in animals and the human, sheep, cows, cat, etc. As I said, spongiform يعني الدماغ يصبح مثقب زي الإسفنجة. Now the diseases which I mentioned, Kuro, Crossfield-Jacob disease, GSS, Creutzmann-Strauss-Schinker syndrome. In these diseases, there will be loss of coordination يعني فقدان التوازن، and dementia فقدان الذاكرة أو النسيان. The patient will have disorientation, impaired memory, impaired judgment, and impaired intellect. So the patient will suffer from central nervous system manifestations. How these diseases are linked to prions? The variant type of CJD, the variant type, we said we have the classical one and the variant type, and the mad cow disease are linked. How they are linked? By eating prion infected beef. ينتقل المرض من الأبقار بأكل لحوم الأبقار أو دماغ الأبقار وتنتقل إلى الإنسان، ويسمى هذا المرض variant CJD. Also, prions may be linked. There are research work about this point with other diseases like Alzheimer, Parkinson, Huntington disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, and some cancers, and even diabetes mellitus type 2. Some of these diseases you are going to study them may be mentioned to you during CNS study, but most of them you will study them again in medicine, inshallah, and in neurology in particular. If you would like to know, just you can Google any word and have a simple idea about each diseases. Prions may be linked with these diseases. Most of these diseases, we don't know the cause of them. Maybe prion. These prions are very dangerous. Why? Because they cannot be inactivated. They cannot be stopped from action by a procedure that can destroy nucleic acid. يعني كل البروسيجرز اللي تحط من النيوكليك acid معظمها لا تعمل مع البريونز. For example, they can be viable in formalin. So the brains which are formaldehyde still contain prions. They are resistant to radiation, resistant to boiling, resistant to many common disinfectants. So they become quite dangerous. We cannot destroy them. There are a few ways to destroy them, and I will talk about them in a moment. The diameter of these prions, 5 to 100 nanometer or less. Some of the viruses of this size. By EM and culture, these prions do not show any virion structure like. يعني ليست شبيهة بالفيروسات. ما فيها نيوكليك أسيد. وفي نفس الوقت هالبروتينات الغريبة الابnormal cannot be inactivated by ordinary procedures. Now, normally, as I said, can encode the normal protein, which is PRPC, the cellular, by chromosome number 20. So the PRPC is the normal protein, and we call it NP, normal protein. Normal protein is the PRPC. This normal protein may suffer from conformational changes and converted to abnormal protein, which is PP, prion protein, which is designated, which is named as PRPSC, as I said, secrepi. And this abnormal protein could be found in infected animals like cow. These prions can transmit diseases, and we have mentioned some of the diseases that can be transmitted. And these proteins also can increase prion numbers. هذا البروتين الابنورمال كأنما change the normal protein to abnormal, can increase the numbers of the prions, يحولها من normal protein إلى abnormal. So the prions has no specific amino acid sequence, has a specific amino acid sequence. Prions has a specific amino acid sequence, but they have no nucleic acid, no RNA, no DNA, but have amino acid sequences which are specific sequences. What are the biological and physical characteristics of a prion? Can cause chronic progressive pathology with remission and recovery. We have seen that. They induce no inflammatory response. They are too small to be recognized by the immune system. They are not altered, no alteration of pathogenesis. Either you suppress the immunity or potentiate the immunity, there will be no change. The diameter is 5 to 100 nanometer. No virion-like structure, even by electron microscope. Can be transmitted experimentally to animals. No interferon production against them. You know, viral infection can produce interferon. And they have unusual resistance to ultraviolet light, to radiation, to alcohol, to formalin, to boiling, to proteases, to nucleosis. شوفوا قديش resistant. They can be inactivated now by certain materials like 1 normal or 2 normal NaOH. Prolonged incubation with 1 normal or 2 normal sodium hydroxide can inactivate the prions. We said it can change the normal to abnormal. Look to this picture. You have the blue colored proteins, which are normal protein, which is the C prion. And this is the prion protein, the brown one. The brown one will engage with one of these and is going to change it and to produce new prions. And these two will attack the others and change them gradually until they all become abnormal protein. And these will start to strike or to attack the nervous system, like the brain, for example, and cause the diseases that I have just mentioned. So the prion protein have the capability of changing the normal protein to prions. Let us talk about a disease which is subacute spongiform encephalopathy. The CJD was described by 2 German neurologists just about 100 years ago, Crossfield and Jacob. يعني هذا المرض موصوف قبل 100 سنة ولكن لم يكتشف. Until there was a outbreak of bovine spongiform encephalopathy in humans in 1980s in UK. أول ما انتشر هذا المرض في UK. كلمة Prions منين جاية؟ It has been introduced by Stanley Brusner. Stanley Brusner was the first scientist who coined the word prions. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1997 for this discovery. Look, protein and infection. He was talking about a protein, and these proteins can cause infection, as we mentioned. He coined PR from a protein, this is the PR, and infection ION, so it became a prion. So the prions are initials from the protein and infection. A spongiform, or called sometimes a transmissible instead of a spongiform. يعني مثلا عندنا هذا المرض subacute a transmissible encephalopathy. You can use a transmissible instead of a spongiform. Why it is called a spongiform? Because there will be vacuole changes in the cortex and cerebellum. Remember this. That is why animals suffer from lack of coordination. cerebellum هو مركز التوازن بالجسم, الكوردينيشن, وفقدان الذاكرة وفقدان الذكاء نتيجة الباثولوجي اللي يحصل بالكورتكس. Incubation period is quite long, variable between months to years. The outcome will be fatal. There is no treatment for these diseases. And we will give you more information. The Prion diseases, a prionoprotein is not inactivated by cooking, وهذا يصعب المسألة. يعني واحد دا ياخذ أكل يتصور أنه عن طريق تحضير الطعام, cooking, everything will be destroyed. No, prions cannot be destroyed by cooking or conventional sterilization methods. There are certain methods, certain measures which can limit the spread of the disease. Nowadays in UK, for example, they cannot take sera from patients to be used in a treatment because they are fearful, they fear from prion diseases. What you can do, leukodepletion of a blood transfusion. You take the white BC from the blood, leukodepletion. And during surgical operation, you use disposable instruments just to make sure that the disease will not be transmitted. A transmission can occur by consumption of infected CNS tissue. في كثير من الدول ياكلوا البرين تبع الانيمالز. Or the infection can come by inoculation. For example, if you are using hormonal preparation from animal source. The normal gene, which is the PRP gene, may suffer from a mutation. And this mutation can cause inherited form, which is representing about 10% of the CJD or Prion disease. In scrapie infection, هذا مرض الحكة بالانيمالز, may produce amyloid proteins. So you get amyloid-like fibrils, and we will see these in the figures in a moment. So a Crossfield-Jacob disease could be of 3 types: the sporadic, familial, and variant, the one that I have spoken about. The sporadic, spontaneous change of the normal protein to the abnormal. So spontaneous protein, which is the PRPC, will be changed to PRPSC conversion, or somatic mutation, just spontaneous, not inherited. The familial mutation in the PRP, which I have just mentioned, there is a mutation in the gene of the PRP gene. The variant infection comes from animal. أول واحد السبوراديك يحصل spontaneous. الثاني يحصل نتيجة mutation بالبي ار جين. والثالث يحصل نتيجة infection from bovine spongiform encephalopathy by eating cow tissues, including CNS tissues. Christmas-Strausser-Schinker disease, mutation again in the PRP gene. Fatal familial insomnia, mutation again in the gene. كورو cannibalism، راح نتكلم على الكورو. هذا المرض يحصل عند مجاميع من القبائل اللي تسمى آكلة لحوم البشر، ومن ياكلوا لحوم البشر أكيد some of them are infected or attacked by prions. So Kuro is a disease which is occurring among cannibalism. Now we come to transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. It has three histological characteristics. Spongiform characteristic حكينا فيها. Neural cell loss, gliosis in the brain gray matter. The brain will be riddled with holes. Riddled يعني يصبح زي المنخال. عارفين شو هو المنخال؟ مثقب with holes, sponge-like زي الإسفنجة. And there will be deposition of amyloid made abnormal prionoproteins. The prionoproteins are proteins, amino acids. So these for a long time can be deposited and cause amyloid deposition. You can see it here. This is the normal appearance by CT scan, and you can see the white matter is inside the gray matter. The gray matter is riddled with holes as if it is a spongiform.
Doctor?
This is, we keep your question at the end, please. Now you can see the histology here. The brain tissue is held by the attack of prions to the nervous systems. These are the fibrils, amyloid-like fibrils in Scrapie-associated fibrils. You can see it here, observed in the brain of extract with the Crossfield-Jacob disease. These are called Scrapie fibers are associated, but they can be found, for example, in a Crossfield-Jacob disease. The name is Scrapie-associated fibrils. Now we come to the most important disease, which is caused by prions, CJD, Crossfield-Jacob disease. It is fatal illness of the central nervous system. And remember that I said that we have three types: sporadic, familial, variants. So we are going to talk first of all about the sporadic. Fatal illness usually occurs in middle and old age group in the 6th and 7th decade في الستينيات والسبعينيات من أعمارهم. They suffer from cerebral function disorder and psychiatric disorder. The patients suffer from forgetfulness, ينسى كثيرا, disorientation, لا يعرف مكانه, dementia, change in gait, increase in tone, يتصلب الجسم, involuntary movement, seizure, fit, يعني السقوط بالتشنجات. And they give a picture similar to Kuro, and we will talk about Kuro at the end of the lecture. Again, as I said, the patient will suffer from progressive dementia. هو المريض يجي يحكي لك أو عائلته تحكي لك أنه بدأ ينسى تدريجيا إلى أن أصبح almost فاقد الذاكرة. myoclonus, التشنجات العضلية. Look, this is sporadic, characterized by EG pattern, repetitive wave complexes, تخطيط الدماغ EEG. وهذا هو EEG، ما نريد تفاصيله، بس نعرف أنه repetitive ده تشوفوها repeated wave complexes. The patient also suffers from visual disturbances and ataxia. The sporadic forms occur, as I said, during the 6th and 7th decade. The course of the disease after diagnosis, 4 to 7 months. Then the patient will suffer from paralysis, wasting, pneumonia, and death. قديش الانسيدنس تبعه worldwide 1 case per million per year. The incubation period is quite long of this sporadic disease, CJD, between 3 to 20 years. حتى الشخص ما يذكر متى أكل من لحم البقر الذي كان مصاب بالبريونز. The transmission, the sporadic represent about 85%. The familial represent about 15%. It can be transmitted also by other ways, not only eating, by dura mater graft, corneal graft, زراعة القرنية, electrodes of instruments, growth hormone, all can transmit the disease, but not transmitted, remember, by secretions. No transmission between the family members, no direct transmission, whether direct or by airborne. A transmission to animals by inoculation of infected brain, for example, chimpanzee or mice, when they eat infected brain, they become infected. Infected human brain show the bipharyngeal rods, the fibrillar structure found in Kuro and Secrepi. I have shown you the fibrils. Diagnosis of CJD, clinical, of course. And the abnormal protein and antibodies, although antibodies, we said the immune system is unable, but there are certain methods in which you can detect such antibodies. Definite diagnosis is by pathological examination of the brain tissues. And we have seen the pathology. Therapy, there is no therapy. All cases are fatal. Death occur, as I said, between 4 and 6 months. Prevention of the CJD, nosocomial infection, which has a small risk only, preventable by avoidance of infecting material and sterilization. يعني ممكن يكون عندك أجهزة ملوثة إلكترودز زي ما حكينا، فواحد ياخذ الميجرز الضروري باستعمال الديسبوزبل. يعني مثلا عندك عملية تستعمل disposable materials. The use of a growth hormone which is genetically engineered prepared by genetic engineering يكون أأمن من المصدر الحيواني. The treatment of infectious material with 2N sodium hydroxide for 1 hour. Autoclaving, very important this point. 132 degrees centigrade for 60 to 90 minutes. So you increase the period of autoclaving to destroy the prions. Now we come to the bovine spongiform encephalopathy, mad cow disease, and the variant CJD. احنا حكينا الفاريانت يجي من الكاو، من الماد cow disease. The source from infected food, meat, bone of infected sheep, animal derived feed. انتو كيف ينتقل هذا المرض؟ تعرفون أجلكم الله العلف الحيواني يحضر الآن بطرق متعددة، منها they take the remnants of slaughtered sheep or goat، بقايا الذبح، وتحضر في معامل معينة وتحول إلى powder like substances اللي هي العلف الحيواني. الأبقار مثلا من تأكل هذا العلف الحيواني سوف تصاب بالبريونز، لأنه هذه الشيب أو الجود كانت مصابة. ف eating meat or bone of infected animals, infected sheep for example, so animal derived feed. Incubation period in cattle 2 to 8 years. في الأبقار incubation period 2 to 8 years. In cow will have hyperesthesia يعني تتحسس كثيرا، hyperreflexia, muscle fasciculation يعني twitching, tremor, weight loss, autonomic dysfunction like bradycardia, arrhythmia, reduce rumination يعني الاجترار. تعرفون هذه عندها بطريقة الطعام الأكل تبعها rumination الاجترار. The disease found in small numbers of patients in UK، يعني مو عندنا عشرات أو مئات، يعني بضعة أو يعني لا يتجاوزون العدد عن 20 أو 30 مريض خلال السنوات الأخيرة. Human consumption of bovine infected neural tissue and bone marrow, of course, prions, we said, can survive the heat of cooking. Neuropsychotic changes أكيد كما حكينا. Sensory changes in the limbs and death can occur within 14 months. يعني هذا شوي أبطأ من الsporadic. The patient will suffer from ataxia, dementia, and death. Slower in progression than sporadic. وهلا حكينا أنه ما يطول. حكينا بالsporadic 4 to 6 months until be fatal. Here about 14 months. The characteristic EEG اللي حكينا عليها بالsporadic are not present in the variant type. Again, there is another point of difference, very important, and you should know these points. In MRI of the brain, bulvinar, which is a nucleus present in the thalamus, as you know, give high signal changes characteristic. Bulvinar, high signal changes characteristic brain plaques of prions. So in the variant type, the MRI show us bulvinar high signal. Abnormal prion proteins found in tonsils suggestive of this transmission versus sporadic. So if you check with the tonsils, it is you can detect the abnormal protein, which is suggestive of reticuloendothelial system transmission. This is not present in the sporadic as a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. كورو المرض الذي يحصل في القبائل آكلة لحوم البشر, subacute infection associated with cannibalism. Women and children ate a human brain. Ritualistic cannibalism, طقوس دينية, يعني عندما يموت رئيس القبيلة التي تتبارك فيه لهذا الرئيس تقديرا له وتقديسا له, ياكلوا الدماء لهذا الشخص, ولهذا السبب ينتقل هذا المرض mainly to women and children. Incubation period is quite long, 2 to 40 years. Patient will suffer from ataxia, hyperreflexia, spasticity, or progressive dementia, starvation and death. Changes only in the CNS. There will be neuronal degeneration and the spongiform changes in the cerebral cortex and basal ganglia. No inflammatory response. طبعا ما في inflammatory response. وحكينا البريونز اصلا ما تعمل inflammatory response. They are too small to cause inflammatory response. Gerstmann-Strauss-Schinker disease, GSS, similar to CJD, but occurs at younger age group. يعني لو حكينا in the 4th and 5th decade, this is most probably GSS. Patients suffer mainly from cerebellar ataxia, paralysis. Dementia is less common لأنه الإصابة تتركز بالسيربيلم مو بالكورتكس. Disease evolve over a period of 5 years يتطور. Familial, very rarely sporadic. This can occur in a familiar pattern. Familiar can occur from vertical transmission, from mother to baby, and can be transmitted in experimental animals. So the familiar vertical transmission versus hereditary with the other types. The last one, fatal familial insomnia, sleeping difficulty. From the name, insomnia يعني عدم المقدرة على النوم, sleeping difficulty, a progressive dementia. The age group that affected with this condition, 35 to about 60 years of age. Death occur in about 13 to 25 months, in about 1 to 2 years, can be transmitted to experimental animals. Lastly, case study question, and which is very informative. During the last 3 months, a previously healthy 50-year-old man has become increasingly forgetful. شوف التعبير, increasingly forgetful. Last week, he was unable to return back to home from work. ما يقدر يرجع لداره, disoriented. His work became unsteady, unbalanced, and yesterday has the first grand mal Caesar fit involving the whole body. Grand mal, it means the whole body. He has not traveled outside US and takes no medication. Neurological examination reveals cerebral ataxia, spastic reflexes in his lower extremity. So ataxia, cerebellar ataxia, and spastic. What is the diagnosis? CJ disease. Best diagnostic method? A brain biopsy. What therapy? No therapy. By the end of this slide, we end this lecture. Any question? The student who wants to ask me, please ask your question. Any question?
CGD اختصار لإيش دكتور؟
نعم.
CGD اختصار لشو؟
CGD CJD.
أيوة دكتور.
جاكوب ديزيز.
تمام.
لا عدتها عدة مرات، يعني عدة مرات I am saying CJD يعني أكثر من 10 مرات خلال المحاضرة حكيت CJD Crossfield جاكوب ديزيز. نعم.
طب ليش ما حكيناها مات كاو؟
ليش ما؟ السؤال أوضح بس شوية صوتك.
ليش ما حكيناها مات كاو ديزيز؟
مات كاو ديزيز، المات كاو ديزيز مرض الأبقار. المات كاو ديزيز هو مرض الأبقار الذي ينتقل إلى الإنسان ويسمى بالإنسان variant Crossfield جاكوب disease variant CJD. بعد ما تقرأ المحاضرة إن شاء الله تكون واضحة عندك.
دكتور.
نعم.
إيش الفرق بين CJD وفاريانت CJD؟
لا هو نفس المرض، بس الفاريانت حكينا على الفروقات بالEEG بالبوليفار MRI. الفاريانت CGD شوف حكينا هنا في ريبيتيتيف بالسبوراديك ويف كومبلكسز، بينما هذه غير موجودة. بالبولفينار MRI بالفاريانت موجود السيجنال، هناك ما موجودة. الأعمار مختلفة. التونسلز فيها بريونز. هذا المرض الفاريانت يحصل بعمر مبكر، أقل بروجريشن، يعني المريض يبقى 14 شهر، أكثر من سنة ونص يبقى، بينما هناك نصف سنة 6 أشهر ما يبقى المريض بالسبوراديك. هذه هي الفروقات الرئيسية. ودائما في clinical picture وفي investigations by which you can investigate. النقطة الرئيسية بالvariable ينتقل عن طريق الأبقار from cow mad disease. يعني رديف الكاو ماد ديزيز بالإنسان هو الفاريانت تايب.
طب دكتور ليش الكيس ستدي الأخيرة ما حكينا مثلا فاريانت؟ ليش حكينا CJD بالحالها؟
كيف؟
الكيس ستدي اللي بآخر سلايد ليش حكينا إنه يعني التشخيص هو CJD ما حكينا فاريانت CJD؟
للتسهيل السؤال.
تمام.
يعني أنت حكينا هون ما نريد نخششك بتفاصيل، لأنه بدك كلينيكال داتا أكثر حتى تقدر تميز whether it is variant or the sporadic.
تمام.
فلو أنت جاوبت CJD يعني هذه الحالة مو دايابيتس، صح؟
صحيح.
ولا هايبرتنشن.
مظبوط.
فإذا CJD.
شكرا دكتور.
عفوا عيني، عفوا. في سؤال اسألوا، ترى الموضوع very interesting.
دكتور الفيريود حكينا إحنا بتصيب النبات فقط، صح؟
نعم.
الفيريود بتصيب النبات فقط، صح؟
بالنبات فقط.
طب إذا الإنسان أكلها ما بتصاب؟
لا ما ينصاب بالإنسان، ما في إصابات، ما في إلى حد الآن أي دليل. No disease is discovered in animals including a human being. No disease until now. وربنا يستر.
دكتور، شو هو الإشي اللي أنت حكيته إنه إحنا بنقدر نخفف فيه البريون؟
شو الإشي اللي
بنقدر نخفف فيه البريون على الأقل يعني.
الفيريون؟
البريون.
البريونز، بريون. تلفظ بريون. يعني في دول زي مثلا يوكي أخذوا ميجرز بال30 سنة اللي فاتت أو 35 سنة كثيرة، إلى حد الآن ما يستعملوا pooled سيرة from their individuals، يستوردوها. في وقتها في الثمانينات بدوا يستخدموا الانسترومنتس اللي هي disposable. في بعض الهرمونات من مصدر حيواني مثلا cow etc. They are not using them anymore. They use hormones from genetic engineering preparation and so forth. أبقار مثلا الدول ما تشتري أبقار من بريطانيا وهكذا. العلف الحيواني اللي يقدم لهذه الحيوانات أجلكم الله مثلا يحضر بطرق أخرى بدأ، مو بالطريقة اللي كانت تنقل هذا المرض، وهكذا أشياء كثيرة for prevention. نعم.
في فاكسين الماد كاو؟
في إيش؟
فاكسين.
شوية الصوت عندي ما واضح.
في فاكسين للميد كاو؟
للماد كاو؟ في وات؟
لقاح.
لقاح. لا ما في لقاح. Unfortunately there is no vaccine. Unfortunately vaccine there is no vaccine. No vaccine.
ودكتور عندي فضول، ليه جنون البقر سموه بجنون البقر؟ هسا أنا فاهمة كل إيش أنت حكيته، بس جنون البقر ليش سموها كمسمى يعني كجنون بقرة؟
كجنون البقرة. لأنه أنت شفتي، يعني أنت لو ترجعي هسه إلى المانيفستيشنز أنت راح تقولي عليها جنون. شوفي هايبرستيزيا، يعني بوخزة بسيطة البقرة تثار. هايبرستيزيا يعني تحسس كبير جدا. هايبر ريفلكسيا، muscle fasciculation، tremor، weight loss، autonomic dysfunction، reduce rumination، وكأنما البقرة مو هي. ف coined the word mad cow disease. تأيدين هذا الوصف؟
إيش دكتور؟
You agree with this description؟
هي وصلتني، بس إنه الفكرة إنه فكرت إنه في عندها ثقوب وخلص بتنجن وهيك يعني.
لا هذاك الثقوب هيستولوجيكال، هذاك أشياء علمية، بس from observation point of view as if the cow is not normal. That is why it's called mad cow. She doesn't respond normally. Okay. Other questions? You have a lecture after this lecture, isn't it?
صحيح.
I hope to see you again in the smaller group discussion, and your CR will tell you about the details. Inshallah. Any other comment? or question? Very interesting lecture. You have to read it. And it's a very special lecture, as I said. One of the important lectures, really, in microbiology. At the end, I hope to see you with the small group discussion. Have a nice day. Assalamu alaikum.
يعطيك العافية دكتور.
Allah يعافيكم.